Hello and welcome to Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde by Robert Louis Stephenson. And this is part 7, Incident at the Window. It chanced on Sunday when Mr. Utterson was on his usual walk with Mr. Enfield that their way lay once again through the by-street, and that when they came in front of the door, both stepped in to gaze on it. Well, said Enfield, that's the story at an end at least. We will never see more of Mr. Hyde. I hope not, said Mr. Utterson. Did I ever tell you that I once saw him and shared your feeling of repulsion? It was impossible to do the one without the other, returned Enfield. And by the way, what an ass you must have thought of me not to know that this was a back way to Dr. Jekyll's. It was partly your own fault that I found it out, even when I did. So you found it out, did you, said Utterson? But if that be so, we may step into the court and take a look at the window to tell you the truth. I am uneasy about poor Jekyll, and even outside I feel as if the presence of a friend might do him good. The court was very cold and a little damp, and full of premature twilight, although the sky high up overhead was still bright with sunset. The middle one of the 3 windows was halfway open, and sitting close beside it, taking the air with the infinite sadness of men, like some disconsolate prisoner, Utterson saw Dr. Jekyll. What, Jekyll? He cried. I trust you are better. I am very low, Utterson, replied the doctor drearily. Very low. It will not last long, thank God. You stay too much indoors, said the lawyer. You should be out whipping up the circulation like Mr. Enfield, and get me. And me. This is my cousin, Mr. Enfield, Dr. Jekyll. Come now and get your hat and take a quick turn with us. You are very good, sighed the other. I should very much like to. But no. It's quite impossible. I dare not. But indeed, Mr. Utterson and I am glad to see you. That is really a great pleasure. I would ask you and Mr. Enfield up, but the place is really not fit. Why then, said the lawyer good-naturedly, the best thing we can do is to stay down here and speak with you from where we are. This is just what I was about to venture to purpose, returned the doctor with a smile. But the words were hardly uttered before the smile was struck out of his face, and succeeded an expression of such abject terror and despair as froze as the very blood of the 2 gentlemen below. They saw it, but for a glimpse of the window was instantly thrust down. But the glimpse had been sufficient, and they turned and left the court window without a word, in silence too. They traversed the by-street, and it was not until they had come into neighbouring thoroughfare, where even upon a Sunday, there were still some stirrings of life, that Mr. Utterson had last looked at his companion. They were both pale, and there was answering horror in their eyes. God forgive us, said Mr. Utterson. Mr. Enfield nodded his head very seriously, and walked on once more in silence. The last night. Mr. Utterson was sitting by his fireside one evening, after dinner, when he was surprised to receive a visit from Paul. Bless me, Paul, what brings you here? He cried. And then, taking a second look at him, what ails you? He added. Is the doctor ill? Mr. Utterson, said the man, there is something wrong. Take a seat, and here is a glass of wine for you, said the lawyer. Now take your time and tell me plainly what you want. You know the doctor's ways, sir, replied Paul, and how he shuts himself up. Well, he's shut up again in the cabinet, and I don't like it, sir. I wish I may die if I like it. Mr. Utterson said, Sir, I'm afraid. Now, my good man, said the lawyer, be explicit. What are you afraid of? I've been afraid for about a week, returned Paul, doggedly disregarding the question, and I can bear it no more. The man's appearance amply bore out his words. His manner was altered for the worst, and except the moment when he had first announced his terror, he had not once looked the lawyer in the face. Even now he sat with a glass of wine, untasted, on his knee, and his eye directed to a corner of the floor. "I can bear it no more," he repeated. "Come," said the lawyer. "I see you have some good reason, Paul. I see there is something seriously amiss. Try to tell me what it is." "I think there's been foul play," said Paul hoarsely. "Foul play?" called the lawyer, a great deal frightened and rather inclined to be irritated in consequence. "What foul play? What does this man mean?" I daren't say it, sir," but was the answer. "But will you come along with me and see for yourself?" Mr. Hudson's only answer was to rise and get his hat and greatcoat, but he observed, and with wonder, the greatness of the relief that appeared upon the butler's face, and perhaps was no less than that the wine was still untasted when he set it down to follow. It was a wild, cold, seasonable night of March, with a pale moon lying on her back, as though the wind had tilted her flying rack of the most diaphanous and lawny texture. The wind made talking difficult. The wind made talking difficult, and feckled the blood into the face. It seemed to have swept the streets unusually bare of passengers. Besides, Mr. Hudson thought he had never seen that part of London so deserted. He could have wished it otherwise. Never in his life had he been conscious of so sharp a wish to see and touch his fellow creatures, for struggle as he might, there was borne upon his mind the crushing anticipation of calamity. The square, when they got there, was full of wind and dust, and the thin trees in the garden lashing themselves along the railing. People who had kept the way a pace or two ahead now pulled up in the middle of the pavement, and in spite of bitter weather, took off his hat and mopped his brow with a red pocket handkerchief. But for all the hurry of his coming, these were not the dews of excitation that he wiped away, but the moisture of some strangling anxiously, for his face was white, and his voice, when he spoke, harsh and broken. "Well, sir," he said, "we are here, and God grant there be nothing wrong." "Amen, Paul," said the lawyer. Thereupon the servant knocked in a very guarded manner. The door was opened on a chain, and a voice from within. "Is that you, Paul?" "It's all right," said Paul. "Open the door." The hall, when they entered it, was brightly lighted up, and the fire was built high. And upon the hearth of the whole of the servants, men and women, stood huddled together like a flock of sheep at the sight of Mr. Hudson. The housemaid broke into hysterical whimpering, and the cook crying out, "Bless God, it's Mr. Hudson!" run forward as if to take him by the arms. What? Are you all here?" The lawyer peevishly. "Very irregular, very unseemly. Your master would be far from pleased." "They're all afraid," said Paul. Blank silence followed, no one protesting, only the maid lifted her voice, and now wept loudly. "Hold your tongue," Paul said to her, with a ferocity of ancient was to testify to her own jangled nerves. Indeed, when the girl had so suddenly raised a note of lamentation, they had all started and turned towards the inner door, with faces of dreadful expectation. "And now," continued the butler, addressing the knife boy, "reach me a candle, and get this through hands at once." And then he begged Mr. Hudson to follow him, and led the way to the back garden. "Now, sir," said he, "you come as gently as you can. I want you to hear. I don't want you to be heard. And see here, sir, if by any chance he was to ask you in, don't go." Mr. Utterson's nerves at this unlooked for termination gave a jerk that nearly threw him into balance, but he recollected his courage and followed the butler into the laboratory building, through the surgical theatre and its lumber of crates and bottles to the foot of the stair. Here Paul motioned him to stand on one side and listen while he himself setting down the candle, making a great obvious call on his resolution, mounted the steps and knocked with a somewhat uncertain hand on the red blaze of the cabinet door. "Mr. Utterson, sir, asking to see you," he called, and even as he did so, once more violently signed to the lawyer to give ear. A voice answered from within. "Tell him I cannot see anyone," it said completely. "Thank you, sir," said Paul, with a note of something like triumph in his voice. Taking up the candle, he led Mr. Utterson back across the yard and the great kitchen where the fire was out and beetles were leaping on the floor. "Sir," he said, looking Mr. Utterson in the eyes, "was that my master's voice?" "It seems much changed," replied the lawyer, very pale, but giving look for look. "Changed? Well, yes, I think so," said the butler. "Have I been 20 years in this man's house to be deceived about his voice? No, sir. Master made away with it 8 days ago when we heard him cry out upon the name of God. And who's in there instead of him, and why it stays there, is a thing that cries to heaven, Mr. Utterson." This is a very strange tale, Paul. This is rather a wild tale of my man," said Mr. Utterson, biting his finger. "Suppose it were as you suppose. Supposing Dr. Jekyll to have been, murdered. What could have induced the murder to stay? That won't hold water. It doesn't commend itself to reason. Well, Mr. Utterson, you are a hard man to satisfy, but I know you'll, but I'll do it yet," said Paul. All this last week, you must know him, or at least whatever it is that lives in that cabinet, has been crying night and day for some sort of medicine. He cannot get it to his mind. It was sometimes his way, the master's thing, that is, to write his orders on a sheet of paper and throw it on the stair. We've nothing else this week, we'd had nothing else this week back, nothing but papers and a closed door, and the very meals left there to be smuggled on when nobody was looking. Well, sir, every day, aye, and twice and thrice in the same day, there have been orders and complaints. I've been sent flying to all the wholesales chemists in town. Every time I brought the stuff back, there would be another paper telling me to return it, because it is not pure, and another order is to a different firm. The drug is wanted bitter bad, sir, whatever for. Have you any of these papers?" said Mr. Utterson. Paul felt his pocket and handed it out a crumpled note, which the lawyer, bending nearer to the candle, carefully examined. Its contents run thus: "Dr. Jekyll presented his complaints to me measure more. He assures that their last sample is impure and quite useless for his present purpose. In the year 18, Dr. J purchased somewhat large quantity of mercury me, and he now begs them to search with most sedulous care, and should any of the same quantity be left, forwarded to him at once. Expense is no consideration. The importance of this to Dr. J can hardly be exaggerated. So far this letter has run composedly enough, but here was with a sudden splutter of the pen. The writer's emotion had broken loose. For God's sake, find me some. For God's sake, he added, find me some of the old. This is a strange note, said Mr. Hudson, and then sharply, how did you come to have it open? The man at Moor was main angry, sir, and he threw it back to me like so much dirt, returned Paul. This is unquestionably the doctor's hand. Do you know, resumed the lawyer, I thought it looked like, and the servant, rather sulkily, and then with another voice, but what matters hand of right, he said. I have seen him. Seen him, repeated Hudson. Well, that's it, said Paul. And it was this way. I came suddenly upon the theatre and from the garden. It seems to have slipped out to look for a drug, whatever it is, for the cabinet. Door was open, and there he was at the far end of the room, digging among the crates. He looked up when I came in. gave a kind of cry, whimpered upstairs into the cabinet. It was back for 1 minute then that I saw him, but the hair stood upon my head like quills. Sir, it was mysterious. Sir, it was my master. Why had he a mask upon his face? If it was my master, why did he cry out like a rat and run from me? I served him long enough, and then the man paused, and his hand over his face. This was all very strange circumstances to Miss Stephenson, but I think I begin to see daylight. Your master, Paul, is plainly seized with one of those maladies with both torture and deform. The sufferer, hence, for aught I know, the alteration of his voice, hence the mask of the avoidance of his friends, hence his eagerness to find this drug, by means of which the poor soul remains, some hope of ultimate recovery. God grant that he not be deceived. There is an explanation. There is my explanation. It is sad enough, Paul. And apply to consider. But its plain and natural hangs well together, and delivers form of exorbitant arms. Sir, said the butler, turning to a sort of mottled parlour. That thing was not my master, and there's the truth. My master, here he looked round him, began to whisper. It's a tall, fine build of a man, and that was more of a dwarf. Hudson attempted to protest. Oh, sir, cried Paul. Do you think I do not know my master after 20 years? Do you think I do not know where his head comes to in the cabinet door? When I saw every morning of my life. No, sir, that thing in the mask was never Dr. Jekyll. God knows what it was, but it was never Dr. Jekyll, and that is my belief of my heart, that there was murder done. Paul, replied the lawyer. If you say that, it will become my duty to make certain, as much as I desire, to bring your master's feelings, much as I'm puzzled by this note, which seems to prove him to still be alive. And there we have it, ladies and gentlemen. That's part 7 of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. As I said, I'll be back in 3 weeks' time for part 8. Okay, bye-bye for now.